So this is the seventh podcast of Build by Challenges, and we have our guest Parker Mayes, who will be sharing with us thoughts upon leadership and personal growth. So just give us a brief and how did you get into this journey of building a community out of it?
Absolutely. So, my name's Parker. I am from Raleigh, North Carolina, in the United States. And my personal growth journey really started a few years ago when I realized, like, oh my gosh, there's so much that surrounds leadership. There's so much to be learned in the personal growth space. And so back when I was, right around 18, I was graduating from high school, going to college, and I got connected with this program called the Impact Leadership Village. And what it was, it's a living and learning program. It's a community where you can get plugged in straight from your first, days in university with 80 plus young leaders that are all, interested in growth, interested in development. And so this program was something that straight away as an 18-year-old, I was able to get connected with mentors. I was able to get connected with people that were further along than me. And this really accelerated my growth because instantly I was surrounded by like-minded people who were all focused. And, as we know, it's so important when you're interested in something to be surrounded by people that are also interested in that thing, because then you're learning together from failures, you're learning from challenges, which is why I love this concept. You're learning from the wins, right? And so that was something that really accelerated from 18. So I was a first-year villager in that program and went through the class, and I helped to do some events and stuff like that. Then I went on as a second year. I returned as the president of the village, and then this year I am participating as the board president, so managing the alumni network. And so this has kind of been a consistent theme that I really want to invest my time and invest the way that I do things in the places where I feel like, okay, this is a really great way to spend my time. And also there's a lot of value that I get out of it. And so that's kind of where my personal growth journey started. And now it's been, almost 3 years since I started in that first day, and really discovered, like, wow, leadership and personal growth, there's so much here. And so, here I am now. I know we'll talk about it a little bit, but I'm doing the podcast, Taking a Breath, that I started back at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, which was a resource where I wanted to actually start to learn how to become the expert on these things, start to talk on other podcasts, start to increase my network. And so that was when I really leveled it up and owned it for myself.
Yes, it was a great path for you to have such great people surrounded together. And you also talk about energy and where and how to focus it. So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So in general, I think that the reason that I talk about that so much, that your energy, where you're focusing your energy is so important, is because time is such a limited resource, right? If we only have those 16, 18 hours in the day, how we're spending it and being intentional about it is so important. And so for me, I talk about spending your time and spending your energy wisely. And so the biggest thing with that is, are you doing things that are bringing you long-term value or short-term happiness, right? And the distinction there is, I talk about things that, you're just kind of wasting your time. I see it a lot with, partying or different things like that, just that it's going to bring you that momentary satisfaction. But then the next day, you realize, like, oh shoot, like I wasted that time, or and so I'm not saying that there aren't productive ways to relax, to unwind and things like that. 100% there are, and it's so important. But being intentional, like, okay, hey, instead of hey, I'm going to go watch Netflix for the whole day, 8 hours on a Saturday, right? I talk about it in terms of, okay, let's set some time. Like, okay, let's spend an hour. We're going to intentionally take a break for an hour to watch some Netflix, to unwind, because yeah, like your body needs a break. You can't be go 24 hours a day, but it's intentionality around that. So when I talk about time and energy, yeah, we've got time and energy. And especially for us, like young people, we're like, oh, I want to spend it, spend it, spend it. But we have to be intentional about that. Okay, what's going to bring me long-term value, which is why things like this, conversations and networking, and like they're important, because long-term, these are the people that are going to have your back when you are, looking for a job or you're trying to expand things. So that's why I really value the intentionality behind time and energy.
Yes. So, how does your morning routine starts, and what do you do for your accountability?
Yes. So the first thing is I wake up relatively early. And so this is just something that me personally, like my body wakes me up. I try to go ahead and get things moving as quickly as possible, right? So a lot of times I like to do my activity in the morning. Right now it's getting extremely cold outside, so it's a little bit more of a challenge, but that's always been my intentionality. Like, okay, how can I be productive in the mornings? Whether it's, hopping on and starting to get some good thoughts down, creativity in the mornings, or working on new podcast ideas, things like that. I try to get, because I know my brain works really well in the morning, I try to use that, right? And then once I hit the afternoon, I'm like, okay, well, I did that work from, 6 to 8 a.m. so that now in the afternoon, I'm like, okay, it's an okay time to take a break. And so whether it's putting in some work, especially creative work, when I feel like my brain is at the highest capacity of energy, whether it's physical work, I want to get my body, get those endorphins flowing. And then the third thing that I do is I'm a part of a group called the Morning Hustlers. I think a mutual friend of ours, Greg Santos, runs that. And he is based on the West Coast of the United States. So it's actually 5 a.m. when the call starts for him. So he does that as an accountability every day. For me, it's 8 a.m. because I'm 3 hours behind. But what I'll do is I'll do some things and then get on that. So it's not the first thing I'm doing when I'm waking up, but it's an accountability group that's like, hey, okay, how are we going to be productive today? Greg is great about that. And so he and I have kind of developed this relationship over the last month or so that has been like, okay, how can we increase accountability? How can we continue to help each other grow? And so that's a big piece of accountability, is having the people around you that are going to hold you accountable to do the things that you said you do, right? Even when it gets hard.
Yes, and what do you think about having a self-image, and how to talk to yourself when pursuing something like to be a leader and have a successful journey as a young entrepreneur?
Yeah, self-confidence is something that I stress so much because I work with especially like 16 to 20-year-olds. So high school, early college, it's something that I see a serious lack of. And whether it's because they are so used to comparing themselves to other people on social media, which I know is a big struggle, seeing other people, that brings down self-confidence, or whether it's, their parents don't support what they're doing, or whether it's their friends are not supporting what they're doing, whatever it looks like. I think the biggest thing is you really have to be aware of what you're doing, your reason, your why behind it, and then move towards it, even if there are people saying, right? Because people they want to hate. Like there's so much negativity right now. And the biggest thing for me has been, okay, I want to be intentional about the people that I'm allowing to speak into my life. So I only have, maybe 5 people at any given time that I actually am allowing to really give me clear, honest, concise feedback. Because otherwise, if I'm just letting every single person who happens to want to share some idea give me feedback, then already that's going to constantly be bringing my self-confidence down, right? Because they're like, oh, I don't like that idea. I don't like that idea. Okay, that's fine. It's not going to be for everybody, right? But I know why I'm doing it. I know, so I think there's a huge element of self-awareness there. But for me, self-confidence is about being aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then who you're allowing to speak into your life.
Right, and you talk about things like leaders create leaders, and whom you should surround yourself with. So, what do you think that what are the parts where one leader can learn from some other leader?
Yeah. And this all comes back to kind of my central mission, which is to empower young leaders to take action on their goals. So, me, as someone who's starting a platform, one of my biggest goals of the platform is to help other young people to take action on their goals. And so the reason that leaders create leaders is a big like phrase for me, and a big theme of my content is that I believe that leadership is not just about having the title. It's not just about being that person in charge, but it's then about how can you empower the people around you to own, right? To own those things that you need help with, right? So I'll give you an example of this. That on with my podcast, I have a team that helps me with content. So I have 5 people that manage everything from audio editing to the content creation to the community platform, which we can talk a little bit more about. And the idea is that when these people are helping me and on any team, I want there to be 100% ownership of whatever that part is. So if someone's audio editing, they are even though they're not the team leader, right? They're a leader in this space because they're taking 100% ownership of the task that they've been given. They're putting their effort into it, owning it like it's their own, and they're taking that accountability. And so I think the idea of leaders create leaders is that you as a leader are empowering other people to actually own it, to actually do it, and then they are growing through it, right? So it's all about, when you're a team leader, how can you find the why of the people that are on the team so that you can then actually get them to take the steps towards their goal, so that then, one day I have people on the team that are interested in starting their own podcast. If that's the central focus, then I want to continue to help you towards that goal. Right. So I don't want to say, oh, well, no, keep, stay here and like keep helping me. Like, it's great to have you on the team, but at some point, the whole end statement of young leaders taking action on their goals is that this is just a stepping stone, right? Like, I want to help people, stick around with me for long enough and then be able to go and influence more people. And so that's the big idea of leaders create leaders.
Yes, right, right. And you talk a lot about intentions and like values you should follow. And how does this relate to self boundaries and self values, the intentions part of it?
Yeah. So first, the values side of things is incredibly important to me, because I think that people who don't know what their values are the people that are talking with nothing to say, right? Like, I think that if you know at the core what your values are and why you believe what you believe, then you're going to see success in the things that you're doing, because you have those core values of why. The intentionality side of it is, goes back to the time and energy thing. Being intentional about who you're spending your time with, where you're putting your energy, because and that needs to be centered around your values, right? Because I could say, hey, I really want to go and spend 6 weeks not working and just sitting on a beach somewhere, right? And sure, I could do that, but is that aligned with the core values, my goals, the things that I want to do, right? Like, are my accountability partners, if I say, hey, see you guys, like, I'm going to go sit on a beach for 6 weeks, are they going to say, oh, well, these are the goals that we made? So it's that intentionality. You really are thinking through, okay, who are those people in my life that if that happened, that I would have people saying, like, are you going to be able to still do these things that you've committed to, that so that's the intentionality. But I think core values is so important because it's that guiding compass, right? It's the compass for where am I going, how am I going to get there, and who am I bringing along with me.
Right. And if someone who is new to this leadership field and wants to pursue their own community or own venture, what would be a suggestion or what would be a some of the steps which would help them to find the right path for them?
First and foremost, be a learner. And this is my advice is the way I started my podcast, the way I started in the Leadership Village was simply I wanted to learn from people who were further ahead of me, right? And so we talk about the leadership program. I came into that looking to meet people around me, learn from mentors, and learn from the classes that they were giving to us. And so if you can go into something, especially a space like this, where personal growth as a young person, there's a lot that we don't know. And so we have the opportunity to consistently be learning from the people around us. And if we can do that and be intentional about it, then already we're going to have a step ahead of people who are trying to put out content when they don't know what they're talking about, right? So the reason that I can come to you today and talk about self-awareness and accountability and taking action and all of these things is because I've spent the last 3 years as a learner soaking up all the information that people are sharing, right? And so it takes time. But if you're interested in the leadership space, you're interested in the personal growth space, but you feel like, oh, I'm not really qualified to like be an expert on it yet, that's totally fine because we've all been there, right? It's about, okay, how can I approach this as a learner? So for my podcast platform, for example, I went into it saying, okay, I am not going to be the one sharing initially. I just want to have conversations with people. And so I did exactly what you're doing. I brought in people who were further along than me in different areas of their life. And I said, okay, hey, you're kind of an expert in this field. I'm really interested to learn from you on this topic. And so then I started building. I was like, okay, now I'm 30 episodes in and I have gotten to have 30 unique conversations and then plus, hundreds of others with listeners and with people who are giving advice about it. But it was about, how can I have these intentional weekly conversations that will help me to learn and grow? So if you're interested as a listener in creating a platform or creating a community around leadership or personal growth or anything really, right? Anything as a young person, figure out those steps to how can you become an expert in the field. And a lot of it is figuring out who's already doing it and how can I learn from their mistakes? How can I learn from their wins? How can I learn from the things that they've already gone through so that you can be steps ahead and having those conversations with those people?
Right. And like, how do you interact with people to get them guests for your podcast?
Yeah, and this is something that's been interesting, especially with COVID. I think that there is so much willingness because people have a little bit of extra time to say, hey, if you reach out, I think you'd be surprised. This past week, I've had a couple people on actually that have been, anywhere from like 15 to 25,000 followers on Instagram. And initially, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, dang, that feels like a lot, right? Like I'm like, okay, that's kind of out of my comfort zone. But then when I reach out and then, 2 days later get a message back that says, hey, yeah, like let's set up some time. I'm like, oh, dang, like that's really cool. So I think as far as guests, I think especially right now, you can capitalize on the fact that people have a little bit more time. And you can capitalize on the fact that they're willing to help, especially young people. So a lot of times how I frame it is like, hey, I'm a student at this university and I am really interested in learning. If you're young, you already have that advantage. People want to help young people, right? Like they want to see you succeed. They want to feel accomplished. Like, oh yeah, I helped, this person to get to the next level. And if you have a platform around it, you can give that additional bonus of, hey, I want to share your story with more people, right? You get that exposure. So even if you're not interested in starting a platform, so like you meant your question was kind of how do you get guests, which I would say, those are all good ways to get guests. But even if you don't have a platform and you're just interested in having conversations, I think it's really important to just put yourself out there, say, hey, I'm really interested in just learning from you, right? And those first two things still apply. Hey, I'm young and I'm interested in learning, and they have more time right now. And so you can really push into those two things. Obviously, you don't have the platform to leverage, like, hey, I want to share with more people, but it's simply about, hey, I'm really interested in learning. I'm really inspired by you, your work, your story, whatever it is for them. And then, yeah, pursuing that wholeheartedly.
Great, man. And What book would you mention, or what books would you mention which started your journey, or which had a great impact on your journey till now?
Perfect. Yeah. So there's two that I'll mention. One thing that I want to mention before I jump into those is this idea of self awareness. And the reason I mention that right now is because it's so important to have self awareness around your learning. And I think there is so much emphasis on like, books or reading, and some people are like, oh dude, I just really don't like reading that much, or I don't like. And if that's the case, the self-awareness to know, okay, there are other resources, right? Like we have YouTube, we have podcasts, we have all of these different ways that you can be learning that are outside of books, or even just audio books, right? So like if you're not a fan of reading, but you can listen for hours on end to a podcast, check out audiobooks. Highly recommend it. The two books that I'm going to recommend are, one, there's a book called Max Out Your Life by Ed Mylett. And he is someone who has really, his podcast is really good as well. His social media content is really good. But the book is a short read. It's extremely high value, and you should 100% check that out. I highly recommend it. It goes into his core values, his daily routine, how he got to where he is, millions of followers on Instagram, and really influential content. And then the second one, I'm involved with a program called Dale Carnegie Training, and the book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This is one that I'm actually still reading right now, but incredibly high value. It's something, I think Dale Carnegie's books in general are really good. So if you haven't heard of him, check him out. But very just thoughtful, very wise. And the training programs that I'm getting involved with are also leadership and personal growth focused. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, just search up Dale Carnegie Training, because that is something as well that's a really high value add. And so those two books are the ones I would most highly recommend. And then the self-awareness to know, hey, I don't like reading. Okay, check out the audiobook version. Or, if you just need free resources because you don't have necessarily the money to spend on a lot of books, totally fine. There's podcasts, there's YouTube, like there's a lot of learning that can be done. Don't use not having the money as an excuse not to learn, right?
Yes, that's great, man. And what would be a in general suggestion, or for people who are having or going through this pandemic scene and getting something good out of it?
Yeah. So, and I talk about this, and I know a lot of the people that I've chatted with are in agreement with me that the pandemic has been this kind of accelerator. Like if you are on a trajectory and a path toward growth, or on a trajectory and a path the opposite way, toward you are struggling with something, or you are, then the pandemic really accelerated that. And so for me, I think that if you are right now, so you specifically mentioned like being in a good place right now, which is where I feel like I am, that the pandemic, while not being a good thing in general, has been a good thing for me to be able to really focus on some things that I'm really interested in. And so to your point, I think that if people are in a good place right now, I think it's an amazing time to spend investing in yourself, right? It's about taking the time that you've been given and actually spending it intentionally to invest. And so that's going to be my big takeaway, is if you are in a good place right now, continue investing in yourself. And then the other thing is to people around you. We talked about it a little bit just briefly, but it's about who are those people in your life that would hold you accountable. And for you as a listener today, thinking about that, okay, who are the 5 people that are closest to me that if I changed my goals or I stopped working towards it, that they would know and they would hold me accountable to it. And so those are the 2 big takeaways. 1, invest in yourself, and 2, evaluate your connections around you and who's holding you accountable.
Great, man. It was really nice talking to you. Just can you let the audience know where can they find you, and where can they find your podcast and your community too?
100%. So you can check out the podcast. It's at Taking a Breath Podcast on Instagram. There you'll also see the links to listen and everything, but a direct link is flow, FLOW.page/Parker Mays. If you just type that into browser, it'll come up with the links to listen. And then the community platform that you mentioned there, I know we didn't talk about it as much, but the idea is it's specifically for 16 to 24-year-olds, so young leaders. And the idea is basically what we've been talking about, right? It's an opportunity to build your network. So if you're interested in that, we do Zoom calls with my podcast guests. We do networking calls. We do social calls where people can just get the chance to hang out and interact. And this is like a global platform. So there's we have on the last call, we had 5 countries represented. And, so it's a really cool way to have people from across the world get the chance to meet. And so, yeah, that was just a quick plug for that, but at flow.page/Parker Mays at Taking a Breath Podcast on Instagram.
Really appreciate that you have taken time to be a guest on this podcast, and all the best for your future ventures, and really appreciate you for putting out some great content and talking about leadership for the young people out here.
100%. I'm happy to do it. I'll continue doing it. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on today. I'm really excited to see where this takes you and to continue to learn. I think that, Greg, who connected us, I'm really grateful because I think it's amazing to have people like him, like you, who are really pouring into the next generation of leaders. And, we're all working towards this together. We're learning from each other. And so continue the great work, man.
Yeah, man. Have a great one.
You too.